Hello everyone and welcome back. In this lesson we are going to pre-render this Angular application that we have here. We are going to generate the HTML that we see here on the screen and we are going to output that to an HTML file. We are going to be using the universal bundle that we have generated here, and to perform the pre-rendering we are going to add here a file to our root folder. We are going to call it prerender.ts. The first thing that we're going to do is we are going to import our server-side bundle into our pre-render program. So we are going to import it in the following way. We are going to do a normal node require of the main.bundle file, which is under the dist server directory, and we're going to get a reference to the application server ModuleFactory. The ModuleFactory will enable us to render our application. And in order to use the ModuleFactory to do that, we are going to need a function from platform server, which is called renderModuleFactory. This function can be used to render the root of our application in the following way. We are going to call renderModuleFactory, and we are going to pass in as the first argument the module factory of our root application. And as the second argument, we are going to pass in here a series of parameters. The first parameter that we are going to be passing in is a document. So whenever we are rendering, we are basing ourselves on a template. In the case of our client-side application, that initial template is going to be our index.html. So if we open it here, we can see that this is our base template, and here is where our application root is going to get rendered. In our case, we will not use initially an index.html. Instead, we are going to specify here a hard-coded string that simply renders the application root. The second argument that we're going to specify here in our renderModuleFactory call is going to be the URL parameter. This is going to specify exactly which route do we want to render, because let's remember our application root component will have here on its template a router outlet. So we need to identify using the router what is exactly the content that we need inside this router outlet tag. In this case, we are going to be rendering the root route, which should render here this list of cards with courses. This function call to renderModuleFactory is going to return us a promise. And if the promise is correctly evaluated, the value that we're going to get here is the HTML that was rendered. In order to have a good look at that HTML, we're going to save it to an HTML file. We're going to import here the writeFileSync node function, and here we are simply going to write this HTML to a file. We are going to do this call writeFileSync. We are going to write the output to a prerender.html file, and here is the HTML that got rendered. Let's also add here a console log so that we can see on the terminal what is going on. So this is the case where the rendering occurred successfully. Now we also want to cover the case when something went wrong. We are going to add here a catch to our promise, and in case of an error, we are going to log it to the screen. Let's quickly format the code with Alt-Command-L. And from here, we have already an initial implementation of our pre-rendering program. Let's try this out. We are going to be calling this pre-render file from the terminal using tsnode. And for that, we are going to be using this npm script that we already have available here in our package.json, which is the pre-render task. So as you can see, it simply uses tsnode, which is a small command line utility that allows us to immediately execute TypeScript files, and to tsnode we are passing in our file prerender.ts. So if we now head over to the terminal and run npm run prerender, let's have a look at the output. While running the program, we can see that we got here an error. We can see that we are missing here zone.js, so we are going to be adding here a couple of global imports to our program that are essential for server-side rendering to work. So the first import is going to be a node version of zone.js, and we also need to reflect metadata. With this in place, let's head over to our terminal and try pre-rendering again. This time around, we get to a very common error that you might find while trying to pre-render an Angular application, which is cannot read property module type of undefined. So what is going on here? The problem is that this bundle that we have here is not a production bundle. Let's then quickly rebuild our server application in production mode. So we're going to take the same command that we used before, ngbuild --app, the name of the application, and we're going to run this in production mode. After a while, the production build is going to finish, and we're going to have here a couple of production bundles that are going to be available here in our dist folder. There is a small problem, which is the bundle file names have this hash here. We usually want this hash in the case of client-side applications so that each bundle is unique. But in the case of a server-side application, we would prefer the name of this file to be constant so that we can import it here. Right now, this import here would no longer work. In order to fix this problem, we are going to rebuild our production application, but with an extra parameter, --output hashing equals false. This is going to remove the hash from the file name, and we will be able to import consistently our universal bundle again. After a while, our build is going to be completed, and if we head over to dist server, we now have here a production bundle with a constant file name without the hashing. Let's then try to run our pre-render function again. We're going to run npm run pre-render. Let's have a look at the output. As we can see, we had here a console.log of some data to the screen, but we also have here this message, pre-rendering successful. The pre-render.html file was saved. If we now open the file, we are going to see that we have here a lot of HTML. It's not formatted, so let's select it with Command A and format everything with Command Alt L. This is going to take a moment, but after a while we are going to get here a formatted version of this HTML. So as we can see here on the head of the page, of the HTML page, we have here the typical styling that is generated by Angular. Let's then collapse here the head with all the styles, and we can have a look here at the HTML. So as we can see, we have here a series of cards, of material cards that are getting rendered. If we do a search here by mat-card, we are going to see here, for example, that we have here the card that corresponds to the universal course, and here we have several other cards. If we now scroll down to the bottom, we can see that we are not importing here any JavaScript bundles, and also on the head we are not importing any CSS bundles. This is because we used here essentially an empty index.html file that only renders the application itself. Let's have a look at what this HTML looks like on the browser. For that we are going to be using the http-server utility. So in case that you don't have it installed on your node global installation, let's then start by installing it with npm install -g http-server, and after a moment we will have here this utility globally available. So if we now do http-server and we serve the current directory, we are going to be able to see what this file looks at the level of the browser. So let's head over to localhost port 8080 and we're going to load the pre-render.html file. So as you can see, this is what the HTML is looking right now on the browser. So as you can see, it's not yet the complete application, but it's a pretty good start. So what is missing here? We can see that the styling of the application is not complete, and this is because we are missing the CSS bundle. Also, if we click on the buttons, we can see that the application is not active. This is just a plain static HTML page. So we also need to load the Angular bundles at the level of the client, and we need to have Angular to take over the front end as a normal single page application.